Hey there, welcome everybody. Jonas Pilz here, Master Trainer at Maxon, and today we are going to continue with our demystifying post-production series about Redshift. And yeah, hello everyone as you're coming in. And yeah, I've got fantastic people here with me. We've got Ellie, we've got Darrin, we've got Lionel, we've got Simon. And yeah, before we start, I have to ask, can you see my screen already?
No.
No screen. That's
not yet.
Weird. Not yet. Here we go. Now it should work.
There it is.
There we go.
Great.
Yep.
Great. So I want to start with some housekeeping, and what you see here is the Maxon events page. You can see that if you go to maxon.net and then to news and events. This is the page, and here is a list of all of the upcoming webinars and other events that we're going to do. So of course, we've got the Demystifying Post-Production series each Monday, and as I said earlier, the topic of this month is Redshift. Then we also have an Ask the Trainer session this Thursday, and VFX and Chill on Friday. And then we also have hands-on sessions running at the moment about, well, Cinema 4D. It's a beginner's course for Cinema 4D, and also one beginner's course on particles. So that's the stuff that we're currently running. If you missed a session of the public ones, like the demystifying post-production and Ask the Trainer, you can go to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, and here you can find all of the recordings of the webinars we did in the past. And then if you're interested in certification, there are a few more things. So this is the certification side. You can go to maxon.net/certification. You can also find it here under Learn Certification. And then if you scroll down, you find the elementary knowledge test. And look what happened this week. This one turned blue. So it's now a clickable link, and we made our promise come true and added a Redshift quiz. So if you want to take it, just click this link and it will forward you to our online test.
Is that Redshift for Cinema 4D specifically?
Yes, it's Redshift for Cinema 4D. Exactly. Yeah, maybe we should add that here. But now you know. Great. We also have the Cinema 4D Basics Comprehensive certification, which is up to 4-hour test that you have to do one-on-one with a trainer, and also trainer certification. But if you want to learn more about certification, please reach out to us either by writing to training@maxon.net, or even better, to certification@maxon.net. And last but not least, before we start, we want to give away free t-shirts, and you find the link, including the coupon code, in the handout section in the PDF that is there. And here are all of the t-shirts that you can order in different colors and sizes and so on. And once you check out and enter the coupon code earlier, you don't have to pay for the t-shirt, just for the shipping, and that's a really cool thing. All right.
Can I ask a question? Do you have to be wearing the Redshift shirt if you take the Redshift online quiz?
Well, we can add that, but until now, it's not required. All right. Darrin, are you ready?
Yeah, I believe I am.
You believe you are, so
I believe I am.
I'm going to make you the presenter. Here you go.
There we are. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so today I want to talk to you all about hair in Redshift. And I've been sort of diving into this for, I don't know, at least the past month or so. And I found that there's just a lot of fascinating ways to create and work and color hair. in Redshift. But let's start with something that we all have access to in the asset browser here. There is a simple Cheetah hair example scene. So I'm going to load that up, and I'm going to render this right now with, and I believe this is either standard or physical. So this is not Redshift. I just want you to see how this looks just right off the bat, because now I'm going to switch to Redshift. And what I want to point out is the actual hair color. Okay, so there's these, highlights, right? The specularity that we're seeing on the, around the perimeter, but on the inside, we're getting some, black hair and we're getting some yellow hair as we expect. Now, I'm going to switch to Redshift, and I'm going to make a couple changes. I'm going to turn off GI, go low samples. Let's turn off caustics, and under globals, I'm going to turn off the default light. And I think that will be good for now. And I'm going to go ahead and start my Redshift IPR. And we're going to get a lot of things just automatically being translated as much as they can be in Redshift. But one thing right off the bat is that the hair isn't really colored like it is in, just using the Cinema 4D renderer. So what we need to do is we need to get a Redshift hair material. And I'm going to go to the material manager. And before I do that, let me point out that with the Cinema 4D hair, we have, let's go large icon, let's take this hair out. We have this, this base object with this material, which has this texture, which has a spherical projection and 3x3 tiles on the U and V. Now, in the hair material on there, the color for it is this brown gradient, right? But because this option is enabled in Cinema 4D's renderer, it's automatically using the surface color from the body and this material with its spherical projection. But Redshift doesn't recognize that. So let's see what we need to do. So I'm going to create the Redshift hair material. So I'm going to the Materials Manager, Redshift Materials, and then choosing hair. And I'm going to put this on top of the hair and turn the hair back on and force a refresh. I have noticed that I need to refresh a lot when I'm making changes to hair to get the update in the hair object. Now, I also want to point out that we're only really getting these hairs here because the hair render, Cinema 4D's hair renderer is here as one of the, I guess it's like listed under post effects, but there's the hair renderer. If I disable it, and do I need to refresh? Yeah, and I'll refresh. Then there are no hairs from the hair object, okay? And this is specific to working with the hair object in Redshift. So I'm gonna turn that back on. I don't think the sampling is relevant. Yeah, and we're not gonna worry about the multipasses or objects, but the point is this does need to be here to render hairs if you're working with the Cinema 4D hair object. Later on, Jonas is going to show us how to render splines using this hair system. So let me go ahead and close that and force a refresh so we can see the hairs back again. And let's return to this whole thing with the Redshift hair. So this Redshift hair material, you'll see in a moment, it has actually 3 nodes in it. So let me pop it open here. And the 3 nodes are the output, which is the standard end node for any material. And then we have the Redshift Hair node and Redshift's Cinema 4D Hair Attributes node. Okay, now let's actually see what nodes do we actually have here. So in the Redshift shader graph, find nodes, I'm going to type hair. Now there are 2 types of hair materials, and then there are 3 additional hair nodes. And we're going to look at all of them, starting with this one, Cinema 4D Hair Attributes, which by default looks like that, and then the hair material by default looks like that. Now this hair material is the same as this one, as this hair attributes is the same as this one. The difference is when we choose that Redshift hair material, it's automatically linked all of the relevant channels from Cinema 4D's hair material into the Redshift hair material. Now this is not a perfect one-to-one. They're, after all, different renderers. And like I mentioned earlier, we're not really getting the color on the hairs as we'd expect. And this is because like I pointed out, in the hair material color, there's the surface option. Well, this doesn't really play very well with the Redshift hair. So what we need is the texture here. So I'm going to go to the material that's on the body. I'm going to copy this texture, and then in the Redshift, in the hair material, let's close that. Let's go back to here. So I'm copying the texture that's on the body, and then I'm going to the hair material on that body, or on that hair object. I'm going to paste that Cheetah shader. Okay, and I'm going to. We see a lot of white. You know, the specular strength is quite strong for Redshift, so I'm going to turn that down to like 4%, so we can see more of, and force a refresh, and see more of the underlying color rather than that specular reflection. So I'm just going to let this update. Down here, I can see it's extracting, and then it was doing some other. There we go. So now I'm actually getting that hair color from this texture on the hairs, but it doesn't really match up with the underlying surface, which now I just disabled the hair so we could see it. So there's a spherical projection, there's some tiling in this. So we need to get the same thing here. How do we do that? Well, there's a specific shader exactly for this. It's called the Projector Shader. So I'm going to go into the texture dropdown here in my Cinema 4D hair material, and I'm going to choose Effects Projector. Now, in the Projector Shader settings, I'm going to go in there, and I could do this all manually, but I will instead single-click the tag that I want to take this settings from, and then I'm going to click on Paste Tag. Okay, so now it's automatically all synced up. And if I go, and let's turn the hair back on and refresh, and now we're going to see that the hair color matches the body color. Let's just give that a moment. There we are. Okay, so, you know, again, it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison between, you know, Redshift and Cinema 4D's renderers, but we are getting the color on the hairs, which is the key point here. And the reason why it's working is because in the Redshift hair material, there is this out color. And this out color actually takes the like the UVs and ports them into the Redshift hair. So the Cinema 4D hair attributes node is critical when you have a material on your model and hair color is coming from that, you know, and that texture is using UVs. You need this hair attributes. So we can color the hair using Cinema 4D's hair material, just as we typically do in Redshift. But Redshift has some additional nodes that give us even more control and maybe even more straightforward and simple control. Now, let me switch gears here. And let's go to Redshift Hair Woman Start. Now I have, now this model, this hair preset is Hairstyle Woman. This is also in the asset browser. I've, you know, replaced some Cinema 4D lights with Redshift lights. And yeah, and some, you know, the material that was on the woman had I replaced that. But let's see, this should be all default. Let's see, we have 3 hair objects. We have this, you know, these fine hairs on the neck. We have the ponytail, and we have the hair leading on the head leading to the ponytail. And they each have their own Cinema 4D hair material, but they all have the same Redshift hair, which is the default one, which I was showing you. So let's start with just this one. Let me go ahead and start that render so you can see its current default state. And then I want to show you the Redshift principled hair node. There we go. Alrighty, so and let's see, principled hair node. Okay, so let me go in here, and you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and change my layout to my Redshift shader graph. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to get a new Redshift hair node here. I just want to make sure that oops, doesn't need an RS, does it? I want to make sure that you can sort of see sort of the basics of the, you know, controlling color with this guy. So I'm gonna go ahead and start that renderer. And it's extracting the geometry and preparing ray tracing hierarchies and etc. And then there we go. So this is the default Redshift hair material. And at this point, we're not, you know, it's not getting any information from the Cinema 4D hair materials that are on there. There may be some things with like if I go to the main hair, and let's say I go to, let's turn off like thickness, frizz, kink, density, and clump, and then force a refresh. Those like hair material channel qualities are read independently of color, right? So we can see that with those off, even though the Redshift hair is on top, you know, they're still relevant. Let me undo those.
Can you also quickly
yeah.
say something about the lighting setup that you were using in this one? Because my experience is that creating the hair shaders and also it's very connected to the lighting setup to make it look good. So that might be helpful.
You're so right. You're very right. Without lighting, you know, hair is just not going to look good because it's how the light is reflected and absorbed and the translucency, and you know, that's everything about the hair. So let me break this down. I have first a key light. Okay, so we can see that that's coming from the right side, and then on the back, it's quite dark, and we have this shadow back here. And then, so let me show you the fill light. This is a dome light, okay? And in it, I actually have an HDR loaded. So we are actually getting some color coming into the hair from that. And then I have a backlight to really, really make the back of the hair really pop. So with all of them together, this is how it looks. Now, in the Redshift Hair, we have, let me fold this up. In the general properties, we have the internal reflection, diffuse, transmission, primary reflection. And this is, although this is, a great and, quite a powerful way to adjust hair color and like reflections and everything, it is sort of like it is Redshift's like older solution here. And there are a lot more parameters to be concerned about. So here in this case, I'm just doing a woman's hair. And what I'm going to use instead of this Redshift Hair node, I'm going to use the Principled Hair node. And this node is, I forgot the name of the author of this paper, but it's all about how essentially we have the reflection on the hair, and we have the color by way of melanin, how much melanin is in the hair and how red is that melanin. So, when we unfold this, we have diffuse contribution, we have variation, but first we have reflection / transmission, which I'm going to break down, and then we have the color. The color has 4 settings here. The thing is, if I put here, let me make this like a green. If I put the albedo mix to 1, then we're actually no longer getting the physically accurate or realistic hair color because it's now using an albedo as opposed to melanin and what is it, like phenomelanin or something? Let's see if I drag this in. Yeah, pheomelanin. So, and we can blend between them, but it's not the most realistic. So I'm going to put that back down to 0, and you see there's no green. So this albedo color is irrelevant when the albedo mix is at 0. It's the same idea with diffuse, okay? So I'll put that color in there and put that up to 1, and now, it's like a different quality of just sort of fake hair color. And, we can blend that in with the diffuse amount. But for realistic hair, we want to stay away from albedo and diffuse and focus on the melanin. So we have a slider at 0. We're going to get essentially white hair. And then at 1, we're going to have black hair, essentially. Now, if we go through the slider, we're going to go through ranges of blonde, brunette, red, and then black. And within each one of those areas, like let's say I want blonde, so I'm going to bring this melanin down. Now I can focus on the melanin redness or the pheomelanin, and I can turn that down, and then I'm getting a very softer, lighter blonde color. If I bring that all the way up to 1, then I'm getting a much more rich blonde color. And so just by focusing on the melanin and the pheomelanin, we can really dial in a realistic color. But how the hair plays with light in like reflection and transmission, we have some control here, and it's, I think, a little more straightforward than in Cinema 4D's hair material. In Cinema 4D's hair material, we have specular, we have primary, secondary, and back specular. There's transparency here also, but there's also this illumination section. And these sliders, diffuse, roughness, variation, and reflectiveness do matter. So I can, increase the roughness and add some variation and refresh this. And actually, you know what? Well, we'll see. Actually, I don't think now it's going to matter because I'm using the principled hair, right? So let me actually just undo that. So what I want to point out is in the reflection/transmission, we have the roughness along the length of a hair, or the length of all the hairs. That's just roughness. And then we have the roughness across the whole like hair body, and that's roughness radial. So the lower these values are, the more intense and crisp or sharp the reflection will be on the hairs. The greater this is, the softer, more spread out it will be. So if I set this roughness down to a low value, and let me let's go with just the key light here, so we can see this. Let's do one more refresh. Okay, so we can see those specular, or we can see those reflections there with a very low roughness value. And as I increase this, it's going to become wider and it'll become softer as well. It won't be as intense. So this is like 0.5, almost, right? So this is a much, softer looking effect. And we can go all the way up to 1. And, it's going to look very much the same. But let me bring this back to its default. So that's like along the length. And now let's focus on the radial roughness. I'm going to bring that down to a very low value. Let's do 0. Okay, yeah, and these do play together, both of these settings, right? So that's why when roughness radial is at 0, we got nothing. So I got to put something in here, right? So that's probably the lowest value I can enter. Way too low to get anything. So I'm going to bring it up just a bit. And I'm going to start to slide this up. And we're going to see more color come in, like around that specular, right? And that's that radial roughness, that reflection across the all of the hair's width. Okay. So I find this to be a little more straightforward. I'm going to put these back to their defaults, but then we have this angle shift, and this is going to actually allow us to like position where these reflections are going to be, like at the root or at the tip. So if I want the reflections to be at the tip of the hairs, then let's see, I think that's the negative value, and it goes from -15 to +15. So that's the reflections closer to the tip, and we can turn down the roughness so that hopefully that'd be more apparent. And then as I increase the angle shift up to the +15, then we're going to see those reflections closer to the root. Okay. Now the IOR, the index of reflection or index of refraction, that is 1.55. That's the I think the physically accurate value for human hair. The lower this is, the less reflective the hair will be. Let's put the roughness values back up and put this down to its lowest value, 1. Okay, so we're getting barely anything here. So let's just bring it up just a smidge. And there we go, and we're starting, and so again, the greater this value, the more reflective the hair is. And so we're seeing more reflectiveness and hair color through the transmission here. So let me reset to default here. Samples in this case is irrelevant because I am using Redshift auto sampling. So, yep. Okay, now under advanced, I haven't even messed with that. So that's the principled hair shader. Now, one thing I thought would be great is, okay, well, can I use a texture map to, you know, affect the melanin color? And not really, it's different types of data. There is some control here. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, you just read my mind. That was gonna be my question. If you can control this with texture color.
You can do it. I mean, look, you can. All
At
right,
least with a grayscale, because it's a float value, right?
But it's sort of a pain because you have to be very specific with your grayscale values. So look, the out color is the type is color and the value is vector. And then for example, the pheomelanin, that is a real. That's, you know, real data. So if we're like taking a texture into here, then we have to like clamp it because for example, the melanin, like if we go from white, if we go from like a white color, which would be probably 0 to a black color in a texture, you know, then everything in between is going to just run through the gamut of all the variations of, you know, blonde, brunette, red, and black hairs. So it would need to be clamped. It's just, you know, more difficult. I think if you really want to texture, if you want to color your hairs with textures, I'd suggest, you know, using the Redshift Hair with the C4D Hair attributes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But there's still a lot of things we can do here. So, for example, I'm going to go to this principled hair and I'm going to give it a blonde color. So, like, let's say I want the roots to be blonde and the rest of it to be, you know, like brown or red. So I have this blonde one. I'm going to call that blonde, and then I'm going to duplicate that node, and I'm going to call this brown. And let's connect it here. And then change the melanin and also the redness to get the color I'm going for. And that might be a bit too red. So I think we'll go with, let's see, do I want a higher pheomelanin? Nope, about here's good. Okay, now the cool thing is because these are essentially Redshift shaders, you can use, or Redshift materials, you can use the material blender. So I'll bring in the material blender and let's see, the blonde will be the base and then the brown will be layer 1 and I'll connect that to the output. And I need a blend between these. And there's a node that's ideal for this type of effect going from the root to the tip, and that is hair position. So if we search for nodes with the word hair, We have hair and principled hair. We've looked at those. We've looked at also some C4D hair attributes, but we have hair position, which I'll drag in, and hair random color, which I'll also drag in. And I always end up using a ramp, whatever I'm doing with materials. So I'll go ahead and add that for now. But let's check out hair position. I'm going to connect the hair position node, which really only has these 3 checkboxes. These are irrelevant because right now it's just outputting the same information because of how Cinema 4D's hair UVs are created. So let's connect this to the output so we can see what it is. And what we see is this gradient from black to white, black at the root, white at the tip. And because we don't have any controls, you know, a ramp is ideal here. So I'll connect this to the ramp, and then let's put that out to the surface. And now in the ramp, let's go here. I can now adjust where, you know, where the hair is going to blend, right? So we can like come back here, and now if I connect this to the material blender, layer 1 blend color, and then let's put this into the material output, then we'll see we got the blonde hair at the roots, and then at the tips we get the brown hair, or the, you know, brown reddish hair. And let's see, let me turn on the ponytail and the other lights and the background. And let's see, I turn on that ponytail, but it hasn't really updated. I'm going to force the refresh here. And there's another node here. I put in out the hair random node, and it is it's going to allow us to introduce variation into the individual strands. Here, the hair position, it's well, you know, they're very different purposes, you know, that they serve. So let's check out the hair random color. I'm going to connect it to the output. And oh, that's right, that doesn't play very well. So let's actually, so look, what we can do with it is, let's go to hair position. I'm going to connect the hair position to the hair random color, and then connect the hair random color to the output node. All right, so you know, there is a color here, right? So we can set a color, and then we can randomize its hue, saturation, or value. So we can fiddle with the hue and the saturation and the value, or the brightness. But let's take the hair position, and instead of green, use that hair position. Okay, and let's say that I want, let's turn these down. So I want some more variation along the length. I want some of the strands to be, to have more and less of the color. Let's bring the hue up. I've noticed that the greater these values, the more I sort of lose a lot of control by way of the ramp. And if I want to use this to blend between the 2 hairs, let's take this. Let's see. We can put the ramp into that random color, but can we put the random color into the ramp? Let's see. Yeah, we can. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so here, if I'm going to be like adjusting the position of this and its contrast, I don't have a tremendous amount of control because of how random this already is. So I want to turn these down a bit and just sort of get in just enough variation to get that range between the white and the black. And then I can, with the ramp, I can refine that. So we'll, bring the ramp to essentially its default gradient. And then you see at this point, it's just, there's not enough, there's too much contrast, right? So needed to be low. And then I can go into the ramp and I can bring the black in, and I can bring the white in so that there's more white at the tips. And then I can refine just in little bits the like the value amount or the hue and saturation. Saturation, like we don't see different colors, but it does have an effect on the overall appearance and contrast. So let's bring that back down like so, and let's go to the ramp and get some more gray in here, and then reconnect the hair material blender to the output. And I think I might want to flip these. Yeah. So let's go to the ramp and do an invert. Okay, so now I have the brown at the root, and then the lighter hair at the tip, and I want the tail to be sort of the opposite. So I'm going to duplicate this material, call it tail, apply it specifically to just the ponytail, and then I'll just flip around these guys, the base and layer color. And did that do it, or do I need to actually invert the ramp? We'll see. It is extracting geometry. We just had a really awesome presentation in the, oh gosh, what, the 3D Motion Show.
3D Motion Show, yeah.
Yeah, and it'd be great if someone could post the link to that, because there was a lot of, there's a lot of just great work there on growing hair and styling it. And I think she was using Redshift also, is that correct?
I don't know anymore.
Okay.
But
I think she was. But this, even if she wasn't, the styling is still, it's still a great look at, styling, long straight hair. And there are certainly a lot of different types of hair and a lot of uses for hair in Cinema 4D, be it like, a rug or, a head. So let's see here. So I wanted to also try and create some hair, some black hair, because that's something that we don't see a lot of it. And what I found was that it's very difficult. It's a very there's so much style and so many different qualities of hair that we need to understand, like, what hair is at its core, right? And the Redshift principle to hair begins that journey by looking at the hair color, but in looking at how hair is formed and its style, let me find this image. So I actually, here's a couple of renders that I was able to accomplish, and they're, I think, a good start, but a lot of work needs to be done on them. They're all pretty rough. But what I really want to point out is this chart by Andre Walker. Now this chart, this study was you know, it is mainly for, it does mainly revolve around women's hair. But I did see that that black men's hair tend to fall more into type 4. Or at least that's what I read on the page which I got this from. And let me, let's see, let's get, oh, you know what? I'm a little afraid to try and toggle to that page right now because I don't want something to pop up that I should have closed earlier. So let's shift gears here and focus on styling and creating some African American hair or black men's hair. Now I'm going to stop this renderer and let's switch to, I have my base male head here. And I already actually started styling this so I could save some time. And speaking of time, I need to wrap things up. So let me just go in and let's see, I'm going to get a Redshift Hair. Let's see, materials, hair, and I need its color to be black. So I'm going to use the principled hair shader here. And I'm just going to connect that like so. And then I'm going to go to its melanin. I'm going to turn that up. And so it's nice and dark. And I'll go ahead and apply this Redshift hair to my C4D hair. Now, underneath that Redshift hair, I have this color. I have this thickness of 0.1 to 0.1. Let's go ahead and press play here. But the color is not coming from the C4D hair material. It's coming from the principled hair. So what I need to do is, this reflection is quite intense. So I actually found that it was easier for me to get what I wanted by turning down the IOR. And then I could adjust the, you know, the roughness. Let's force a refresh. And so, you know, this is still very straight. So what I need to do is go into the C4D hair material and, you know, apply some style to it. So if, you know, we're thinking about that type 4 kinky hair, then we can see what we need to try and accomplish here. So I'm going to focus on, I'm not going to break down all these channels, there's too many. So I'm going to go right to kink and increase its scale. And that's going to give a, you know, that zigzag along the length. And we can see that at the tip, there will be more of it than at the root. And the frizz, however, that can actually change the direction of hair altogether. And tends to be sort of a larger variation, but I'm not seeing a difference here, so I'm going to force a refresh to force the geometry to update. And what I started to do was I started to find that I just could only get so far with these channels. You know, one thing that I definitely want is a fade here. So I actually took a C4D gradient and let's close this, and I dropped it on the geometry to see where it would fall on the model. And then I could adjust its position. Here, let's turn this off. And then I can use that to control the density or scale or length of the hair. But once I sort of dialed in this position I liked, then I could, excuse me, I could copy this. And then let's put that back underneath. And then in the C4D hair material, I can go to like scale and paste that shader right there. Let's force a refresh. And then we'll see, like in front of the ear and around the temples, that we get a much better fade appearance. Right, so let's see, I can.
Oh yeah, that's looking great.
Yeah, it's much, much more stylized, And using body paint, we could certainly paint our own maps here. So we don't have time for that, but there is actually already a couple of textures that can be used. So like this asset, this is the, I used hairstyle woman. There's also a man, and there are some textures that are being used with them as well. So here I have this hair density map, which I can copy, and in the hair object, in the guides and in the hairs under growth, I can paste that. So that's further refining where the hairs are seen and not seen. Now let's get some more style in here. So let's go to the hair material. And actually, you know what, I'm going to shift gears a bit. I'm going to use some tools. So I'm going to go to my Barber Shop layout. And I have my hair selection tools on the left.
I like the name of the layout.
Thank you. And actually, this isn't exactly the one I want. So let me go to my Redshift Barber. That's my newer one because it has everything that I want here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to let's do like a lasso selection and select some of these hairs here, and then I'm going to go with the brush tool with selected only on, and with move I can come in and I can sort of pull this up. That's actually quite strong, so let's turn the strength of this down, and there we go. Now I'm actually doing this on the guides rather than the tips or roots or the individual vertices, and the quality and the density of control that you may have here is dependent on the hair object's guides segments. So I have quite a high value here because there are some style tools here that we really need high segments for. For example, if we're doing like a curl, let me go turn down the number of hairs here, and let's start this render. And let me zoom in on, okay, so we got a couple of hair strands here, and they're pretty like kinky, right? So let's turn that down or off. And, when we want like curls, we actually don't use this curl. We instead can achieve it with, there's two ways. One is the wave. So let's see, let's force this refresh. And in the wave parameter here, I'm going to unfold it, and I'm going to set the X and Y frequency to essentially the number of coils that I want. And then, let's see, I'll turn that down, and let's force a refresh. There we go. So now I actually have a coil. One thing I did need to do is on each of these spline graphs, right click and set to maximum, because without doing that, the default values, let's just go reset to default for all of these guys. At the default values, we get something very different, right? So what we need to do is we need to unify the X and Y frequency to the number of coils we want. So let's say 15 and 15. And then we actually need to get the actual like coiling, the one of these phase values to be 90 degrees. And then let's force a refresh there. And if there are enough segments, then we'll see it. But you can see at the base, there's far less of that coiling. So that's why we need to right click on the spline graphs and choose set to maximum for them. And then when we refresh, we'll see a more consistent coil from the base to the tip. Now there's another way to achieve this outside of the material. So let me turn that off and stop that there. And let's choose so like, well, you know what? I'll just do them all. So I'll go to guides, select all these guides, and then we have this curl tool here. So I'm going to select it, and this has a lot of settings, okay? But all I'm interested in here is essentially an angle of 0 and low numbers for the X and Y height and length, particularly the length. So I'm going to set the height down to 1 and the X and Y length to, let's say, 3. And I'll hit apply, and I can start to see that now in the guides themselves, I'm getting that coil, but at the base, there's not enough. So I need to, again, set to maximum for these graphs. And now I'm getting that curling uniformly, across all of the hairs. And let's see, wow. So you know what, I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna switch to one of my example, one of the scenes I was building up, and do a render. And the thing is, I'm actually using multiple hair objects for different parts of the hair. So I'm just gonna start this running real quick. I think this may also be similar to this render, which is, very messy. It's me still finding the best route for this style that I'm going after. But I was happy with how close I was coming. Now I want to actually, thank you. I actually want to give Jonas you guys mind if we go a couple minutes over? Because there's another part of working with hair and Redshift that I haven't even touched. And
to be honest, I think our audience is used to us overrunning. So bear with us, people. We just want to deliver as much knowledge as we can.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're gonna overrun a little bit. So, Darrin, what you just mentioned in like a side sentence is actually something pretty important when you're working with hair.
Before we get there, Jonas, though, can I? There's something I want to point out about getting these styles to work the way we want. So, like here, I'm gonna, for example, I'm gonna go to my brush tool, set its mode to kink, and I'm gonna add kink to these hairs. That's definitely too much, but in the Cinema 4D hair material, there is a parameter called Tighten. And what this does is it's going to essentially accentuate whatever is already happening with a hair. It's going to enhance it and make it even stronger. I think that was probably an unnecessary thing I did just now using that brush tool with the kink mode, but let's just let that go. There it is. Yeah, so it's definitely too much there. But you can see essentially all I did here was I dialed in the base style like I wanted. Let's undo that. And then I essentially just turned on let's see this guy. I just turned on like all these other channels. And these are like default values essentially, but it added enough of the variation and clumping that it's like a good starting point. Let me pull up the render that's going to be closest to this style, and then oops, yeah, yeah. So it's a bit
It's
of
looking fantastic, Darrin.
there we go. Thank you.
That's really nice.
So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Jonas, so you can show the Redshift object tag and how we can use it to render hair without using the Cinema 4D Hair object, splines specifically. So let me stop.
Yeah. So yeah, let me get back to something that you mentioned earlier. And wait, bear with me as I share my screen. I'm not a big multitasking person.
While you're doing that, I'm going to find a link to this hair page that I was checking out.
Yeah. So what you were mentioning, Darrin, was that you were using different hair objects to create those sorts of styles, and this is actually a great tip to use. To don't force yourself into trying to use just one hair object for like different hair lengths or different levels of curl or frizz or kink. Really use different hair objects, and it's not bad if you're using 8 or 10 or 12 or even more different hairstyles, because this will also help you speeding up the render, especially if you are using or if you're handling a lot of hair. And this was already one of the questions by Carl. Do you have tips on optimizing speeding up Redshift renders for hair in motion? This is a tip for rendering hair in Cinema 4D in general. So if you're using multiple hair objects for the same hair count as, well, compared to just one for the very same hair count, the rendering where you're using multiple hair objects will be faster, because it can, well, it is better in taking advantage of the speed of multiple cores.
You know, I also found real quick that when I disabled the RTX enhancement in Redshift Renderer, it actually allowed a slight speed up in my hair renderers. I know that's specific to use, but anyway, wanted to point that out.
Yeah. So yeah, what I want to show you is how you can render splines using hair. So what I have here is a setup that is completely based on hair. I initially just created a circle and then emitted some particles from it and traced them in order to create those splines. And then I just made it editable to clean up the object manager. And here we are. So whenever you want to render splines and you don't want to use like a sweep, for example, you can create a Redshift tag on that object. Let me just do that. You can see that once I deleted it, my rendering is black. But as soon as I right-click, go to Redshift tags, Redshift object, and as long as it's on a spline object, you will get this curve tab. And by default, the mode is set to disabled, but you can set it to hair strands, and this will allow you to render hair. Here we go again. So you can adjust the thickness. You can make it really, really thick. Well, it has to think about it a little bit. You can also adjust the scale, not only the overall scale, but you can, for example, bring down just the right side, which will bring down the thickness towards the tips of the hair. And here on the left side, it would bring down the size of the root of the hair. So let's bring this back to 1 again. And the other thing I wanted to show you is, well, Darrin already showed parts of it. So what I'm using here is basically just a Redshift material with a Redshift Hair random color mode. Darrin explained it already, and you can see there's some randomness going on. I can also use the hair position node and pipe that into diffuse color, and you can see the gradient, also something that Darrin showed before. But sometimes you don't want to render hair strains. You really want to render geometry so that you get some shading, like for example, like a rectangle shape, or a rectangle shape as the profile for the hair, or a circle, something like that. And then you need the shading for the speculas and so on. And this is when you need to adjust the mode here. By default, it's just hair strains, but you can set it to boxes, cylinders, capsules, cones, and so on. And this will create real geometry here. So let it think a little bit. And let me also
And when you're
check.
using this, these options and this tag, am I correct in saying you do not need the C4D hair renderer, right?
Yes. So it's disabled here in the render settings. You don't need the hair render, because all we need here is the spline as the source for the hair, so to speak. And what you're seeing right now is that, well, we lost the color. There is no color along the hair anymore, like the color gradient. And if we plug this, if we plug the hair random color into the hair material, you can also see that it's just one color here. So there is no randomness going on anymore. And this is because once you set it to another mode than hair strains, once you really create geometry using boxes, cylinders, capsules, cones, or strips, you need to make this in a different way. And if you search for hair, there is even one node that is called C4D Hair attributes, but that's not the correct one. What we need is a node called point attribute. So we're using the node point attribute, or was it vertex attribute? Let me search. No, it's vertex attribute. So instead of using the hair random color, I'm going to pipe in the vertex attribute node into the Redshift material. And now you can see that we are getting this default color, and we're here with an attribute name and a drop down. So here we get a curves menu, and here we get other exciting stuff, like, for example, the curve ID color. This is basically, well, let's let it render. And maybe I should deactivate depth of field. But now you can see with curve ID color that it creates random colors for each hair. And let me disable the depth of field here. There we go. So we can see it better. So this is a good one, but it will create full randomness. There is no way of just restricting the randomness to, let's say, orange and a little bit of hue variation towards yellow and red. That's not possible. You always get full randomness. If you want this to be a little bit more controllable, you choose curve ID normalized, because curve ID normalized will give you a grayscale value. Let's wait for it for a second. So here we go. That, well, we cannot see that very well. You see, actually, that should work. That should actually work. So maybe it's just in the setup right now. Well, let me just try throwing a ramp on it, and let's see what it does. Then we're going to use a ramp here, throw that into the diffuse color, and maybe in the ramp we're going to use some sort of preset. It's a lot of geometry that's being created here, so it takes a while.
Still very fast though.
Load the preset. Oh, here you can see it's the colorization is there. It wasn't too visible, but now you can see that we're getting some colorization. And if I wanted what I just told you before, a gradient or randomization from yellow to red, I can do just this, and now you can see that we have random colors on hair geometry, so to speak. Now, if I set the vertex attribute to curve position, this would give us the gradient along the hair based on the spline length.
So that's like hair position?
Exactly.
Okay.
So here we go. Now you can see that we're getting yellow roots and red tips. So
that's cool.
That's pretty cool. And let me switch to another scene because I want to show you something else. Here, I've got just 2 rectangle splines, and I'm going to render these. And as you can see, you don't really see anything except for these, well, 2 really thin lines. And I already applied some Redshift text to it and set the curve to hair strengths. But now let's set this to, let's say, boxes. And let's bring up the thickness to 40 or something. Then we get this. And if we set it to cylinders, it's roundish. It's not really round. Actually, it's also a rectangle. But in the shading, you can see that the Phong angle is pretty high. There's a lot of smoothing going on. But for boxes, it's working really well. Now let's create a Redshift material for that. So let's go to Redshift Materials, Material, and assign this to both. And maybe let's set it to iron. So the cool thing about this is that you can now add all of the effects that you would love to add to like real geometry. For example, what you can do in order to smoothen the curves or to create at least some bevel here is you could add the round corners node and just pipe this into the overall bump. And now if we crank this up a little bit, you can see that we're getting these nice speculars, this nice highlights on the edges. And also cool. You could add a noise. Let's go with the Maxon noise and let's set it to something like Luca. Where is it? Here we go. Let's output this directly. So here we go. You can see that this is also working, and now we could use this, for example, in the reflection, roughness, and so on. So we can create really cool materials here, and if the profile is really simple, we can just use this technique in order to like sweep some splines.
That's very cool because it's so, I'd imagine that this is much more lightweight than having multiple objects and multiple splines and then like essentially the same material, you know?
Yeah, that's true, but there's always a downside. Of course, it's not as controllable. And yeah, in my previous test, there was also some texture stretching here when it was set to adaptive, and then I countered that by using uniform as the intermediate points mode for the splines, but right now it's working. Okay, yeah, that's everything I wanted to add.
If you were to adjust like the tiles V then would we see that reflected?
Oh, that maybe let me.
Like, like where are the UVs, right? Are there UVs?
Let's have a look.
Oh.
Well, it's not too different actually. Oh
Yeah,
yes,
so
yes it is. Here we go. That's what I had before. So, and what we can do about this, at least it worked. And the other example was when I set this to uniform, you get this. And now what we can do is, yeah, we can use the scale parameters here.
Yeah.
And adjust the tiling, so to speak. All right, so let me set this to 4. And here we go. That's maybe 5. That's looking much better. And now, yeah, we can use this in the
Perfect.
in the roughness. Yeah, and now if we just bring those two colors a little bit closer together, we can reduce the contrast in the roughness map, in the roughness noise, and so on.
Cool.
And yeah, now you can see that we've got some resolution problems here. It's not dense enough, so we can simply bring up the number of intermediate points here, let's say to 32, and now you can see that it's round again.
That's
All
awesome.
right.
Thanks, Jonas.
That's pretty much it. That's everything I wanted to show. So let's have a look at the questions. There is one more question from Marco. What if you want streaks of solid color as hair? So maybe the technique that I just showed is answering the question. If you just add solid color in your shader, maybe in the luminance or in the emissive, like in, let me go to the Redshift material node, go to overall, and then emission. If you add it to this one here, you can have really solid color.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. I see a lot of thanks and praise coming in already. Thank you very much for that. And let me jump back to Safari and let's promote our events again. So we just had this session here. On Thursday, we're gonna have an Ask the Trainer session, and VFX and Chill on Friday. And on Wednesday, there are 2 hands-on sessions in a pace where you can easily follow along. One is a beginner's course, an introduction to Cinema 4D, and the other one is a particles course. And if you missed one of our sessions, simply go to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel and just have a look at all of these wonderful recordings. There's a lot of knowledge on this channel already. Cool. And in case you've missed it, in the handout section, you can find a PDF, and the PDF has a coupon code in it where you can access the training team Maxon merch store, so to speak. And once you entered this code, you can get a t-shirt for free, 1 t-shirt for free, and you only have to pay for the shipping. So that's pretty cool stuff. All right, that's everything for today. Thanks a lot, Darrin, for explaining all of that stuff. Really cool.
You're very welcome.
And you did a very great job. And also thanks to Ellie and Lionel in the background who are answering your questions.
Thank you, Ellie. Thanks, Lionel.
And I hope we see each other next time.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.